Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeff Green, Director of Global Government Affairs.
Wow, I didn't expect that. For our next section, we're very lucky to have Grant Schneider and Michael Daniel joining us. You would be hard-pressed to find two gentlemen who know more about federal cyber policy than these two, and we're also really fortunate to have a very educated moderator to keep their feet to the fire, Jason Miller, the executive editor of Federal News Radio. So let's get started. Jason?
Thank you. Their feet will be held. I'm not sure which fire. Hey, I'm going to have, why don't you guys come up? We have a couple chairs. We'll get started. So I'd like to thank the folks from Symantec for inviting me to moderate this tech talk. Not really a TED talk, but a tech talk. So this is the way it's going to work. Over the next 50 minutes, Michael Daniel and Grant Schneider will take about 15 to 20 minutes each, give or take, and deliver you a talk and leave you with some food for thought, right? The topic, as we know, smart cyber, complex challenges, bold solutions. And what we've done is we've asked each of them to leave you with an aha moment, to walk away and going, aha, that's what I need to do differently. That's how I need to make cyber better in my organization, my agency. So, and then we'll do some discussion, and then we'll hopefully answer more of your questions. So before we get started, let me just leave you with one thought-provoking idea, this thought for something for you to ponder while they do their tech talk, but pay attention to them, please. So, when it comes to cybersecurity, why is the state of federal cybersecurity the way it is today? That's a tough question to answer, but let me just give you this. There are more than 60 laws with relative and significant cyber provisions, including one dating back to 1878. Now, Michael, you're going to help me with this one because I probably will get it wrong. The Posse Comitatus. Comitatus, I see in my Latin. Then that is according to the Congressional Research Service. So there are more than 60 laws, the overlap, do they work out together? Are they friends? And I think that's the reason why the complexity of what we're talking about. So there's something for you to ponder. Now we're going to turn to Michael Daniel. He's going to take it away.
Great.
You're going to TED Talk walk?
Yes, I will TED Talk walk because I'm one of those people that can't actually think and talk unless my hands are in motion. So thank you. Thanks to Symantec, my friends Jeff and others at Symantec for inviting me here to talk this morning. What I want to hit on is just a couple of things. First, I want to actually start with the question of why is cybersecurity hard? Or you can think of it as, why the heck do I have a job? Okay, I can hear you snickering out there. But when you actually think about this question, at one level, it's not obvious. I mean, it's computers. They're programmable. It's ones, it's zeros. So what's going on? Why is this problem hard? Now, manifestly, it clearly is, because we've been struggling with it for 15 or 20 years. And you also start to run into some interesting things. If you pull up any one of the various companies' reports, Verizon reports, Symantec's reports, any of my member companies in the Cyber Threat Alliance, and you'll see that the overwhelming majority of intrusions rely on known fixable vulnerabilities. So the bad guys are getting in through a hole that we know about, that we also already know how to fix, and could have fixed probably years ago. So the question is, why? It's not like anybody wants to get hacked. So what's going on? There's clearly something that's not technical that's happening. So I'm going to posit that there are three reasons why cybersecurity is hard. One is that cybersecurity is not just a technical problem. There are technical aspects to the problem. Certainly, you've got to get some of the technical aspects right. If you get those wrong, you've got a problem. But it's way more than just a technical issue. It's also an economic issue. We were just talking about, why do we have holes that we know about, that we know how to fix, still hanging around? It's an incentive issue. That's economics. When you start talking incentives, that's about the economics of the problem. You have systems that nobody wants to touch. Industrial control systems, operating systems that everybody's like, that's working, we don't want to touch it. So that's a business operations decision. That's a business operations risk management decision. You've got human psychology that plays into the mix. We keep telling people, well, what we actually need your password to be is not a word in the English language. It's got to be at least 15 characters long, and it's got to have it in there, right? No human can actually remember that. So we don't account for human psychology in the way that we've actually built the technology. So cybersecurity is all of those things. It's a human factors problem, it's an economic problem, it's a business operations problem, and a technical problem all smushed together. And as long as we keep trying to treat it like it's purely a technical problem, for which there is a technical solution, that if we just buy the right blinky box, that we can solve it, we're going to continue to fail. So that's one issue. Cybersecurity is not just a technical problem. The second issue is that cyberspace plays by different rules. And we keep trying to map than the physical world. And we keep trying to map our physical world experiences onto cyberspace. So we keep getting, when I was at the White House, I would often get questions that ran along the lines of like, well, shouldn't the federal government protect us from insert adversary here? And I would say, okay, would you like us to put some NSA boxes on your network? No. Would you like us to build the Great Firewall of China, around the United States? No. Well, what is it that you would actually like us to do? Well, we'd like for you to make the problem go away. Okay, well, that's not very sophisticated. We actually need to have another discussion about that. Why doesn't that work? Because our notions of border security don't work in cyberspace. There's a word that they love out in Silicon Valley that's even worse than many words here in Washington, D.C., disintermediation, right? They love this term out in Silicon Valley. What it means is you're taking out the middlemen. You're taking out the people in the middle. But guess what? If that works for Amazon to actually reach out and directly touch their customers, it also means the bad guy can directly reach out and touch you too. And there's no way to reinsert the government into that relationship unless we want to fundamentally change the way that the internet works and actually forego many of the benefits that the internet has brought. So cyberspace operates at is a light-speed nodal network, and it doesn't play by the rules that we are familiar with in physical space. And then the third issue is that this is still, frankly, a new policy area. Yes, I know that many of you in this room have been dealing with this for a large-sized chunk of your careers. And, some of us have been at this a while, Greg. But the truth is that in policy terms, this is still a very new area. In legal terms and how our laws and policies and other things develop, it's still a very, very new area. We still don't have a lot of the rules of the road. What do we want the government to do? What do we want the private sector to do? How do we want the relationships between governments to work? Whether you're talking between the federal government and state governments, between international governments. We don't have a lot of that worked out yet. So we've got a problem that's particularly thorny and nasty with several different aspects to it. And as a result, we've got a really hard problem for which we've been trying to pursue very, very simple technological solutions. And the result is that we are still struggling, still very much struggling with this issue. So given this situation, what do we actually do about it? How do we actually start to tackle this problem, which, by the way, is only going to get worse, right? Because every day, we keep hooking more and more stuff up to the internet. So some of us that have been doing this for a while used to think that this problem was hard in a world of wired desktops. Now we're going to do it in the big data mobile cloud, right? We're going to do it in a world where your watch, your Fitbit, your car, your refrigerator, your coffee maker is all going to be a threat vector. I actually saw at a Consumer Electronics show not that long ago an internet-connected hairbrush. Why? I was not entirely clear. Not that it's much use for me, but the truth is we're hooking everything up to the internet. So we're going to make our problem just that much harder. So how do we need to actually start thinking about this? Well, I'd say that the first thing we actually have to do is we have to start thinking about the problem differently. We've actually been going about it almost completely wrong in a few areas. I'm going to talk about sort of two ways that I think that we actually need to change our mindset about the problem and change the way that we think about it. The first is actually in intelligence sharing, information sharing. Now, there's a lot of times that the federal government's been promoting information sharing, both internal to the federal government and external between the government and the private sector, between the private sector for a long time. But in fact, we've actually been asking the wrong people to share the wrong information. We keep asking most businesses to consume and share threat intelligence like they're Symantec, right? Like they're a big cybersecurity company. And not surprisingly, for most businesses and most agencies in the federal government, it's very hard to do that. They're not very good at it. And instead of trying to flog businesses to sharing threat indicators at a technical level, we need to actually change the way that we go about it. And instead, the cybersecurity industry needs to be sharing that kind of information in the background, along with ISPs and other players that can actually produce and consume threat intelligence at speed, at scale. And what we need businesses and agencies to be sharing is the intelligence and information that is related to their business operations, their mission, what it is that they're trying to actually achieve. That's the pieces of information that is most relevant to businesses. What is it that I need to do to keep my business functioning? How do I actually change my behavior and do things differently? At the Cyber Threat Alliance, we built a platform that enables our members to share intelligence at speed, at scale. We're up to 14 members now. Be bringing on a 15th very soon. But if I actually opened that database up and fed it to the majority of businesses in the United States, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And because it's full of data that they wouldn't know how to process or be able to make any sense of. And instead, what we need to be focusing our businesses on is how do they share information that is relevant to what they are most interested in, which is their mission and their business that they're trying to achieve. So that's the piece, in my view, on the intelligence sharing side that we need to make a shift in our mindset. Change the way that we're going about doing intelligence sharing, who we're asking to share what and when, and move that in a direction where we bifurcate it and have the elements that can really focus and enable the sharing to actually do that part at the technical layer and free up businesses and, by corollary in the federal government, free up agencies to focus on the pieces that are related most directly to their mission. And that will make for a much more efficient and effective use of our information sharing capabilities. The second thing that I would say within the federal government is that we have used the approach of what I used to say was every tub on its own bottom. And we treated each federal agency as if it were a completely wholly self-contained vessel, whether it was the Marine Mammal Commission. I knew some of you who know me knew you were waiting for that example, right? Yes, thank you, Grant. Whether you were the Marine Mammal Commission or the Department of Defense. And those two things, from a cybersecurity perspective, are clearly not equal. No offense to the Marine Mammals Commission folks that may be in the audience. And we've tried to treat it like every tub on its own bottom, like every federal agency should be completely responsible from soup to nuts for its cybersecurity, and that it should provision its cybersecurity itself from beginning to end. And I would argue that that's actually the wrong way to think about it. For most federal agencies, that's not a core part of their mission. And in many other areas, say in real estate management or other things, we've thought about other ways of going about it, that agencies can get the services without having to also be property managers, for example. That we can divide up the services that agencies consume. And so I'd say that we need to start thinking about it in the same way in cybersecurity. Now, I'm not proposing that we head towards a Department of Federal IT, because that would be a disaster. That would be like the DMV, times 4. But what I am saying is that you can actually divide up the responsibilities for different pieces of the cybersecurity puzzle. And what you want is the agencies to focus on the pieces that are most core to their mission, the same way that I was just talking about for information sharing and intelligence sharing. You want the pieces that are most related to what it is that they do, to their business, to their mission, to be the parts that they're responsible for, because that's what they care about. and enable a more centralized function for the transport layer and other pieces of the IT technology stack that are much more amenable to centralized both provisioning and securing. So those are really the two things that I would say are two ways that we can begin to shift our thinking in the cybersecurity space to go at the problem a little bit differently. And what I would leave you with as a thought is, what are the other areas that we also need to begin to make a mindset shift in? How do we actually think about this problem from different angles so that we can actually start to tackle it and make progress? How is it that we actually begin to disrupt not just what the adversary is doing on a daily basis, but begin to actually disrupt their entire business model? In effect, what I want to do with the collaboration between the government and the private sector is begin to force the adversary to do business process reengineering on a daily basis. And if any of you have ever lived through business process engineering, you know what an enormous pain that is. And I want to impose that pain on the adversary so that they're busy dealing with that and not hacking us or our companies. So that's what I will leave you with now. I'll turn it back over to Jason and Grant.
Don't go anywhere.
All right.
All right. So I have my one, it's on the clock. We have I have an extra minute to give you my obligatory follow-up. So there's several things that we heard earlier this morning. One of the things that Mike Fay talked about was, he joked about complex solutions to simple problems, right? And it sounds like the way you've laid this out, that's what we've done with cybersecurity is, it's not simple, but it's not a technology problem. It's all
right.
these problems, and we seem to always say, well, what's the technology, right?
That's right.
So how to shift that mindset is very difficult. So talk a little bit about what you see as the way to shift the mindset, because you're right, I hate passwords, but I tried to use, and I'm sorry if they're here, LastPass. I didn't understand it either. And I am in the tech world, kind of, sort of. So we're not, I think we're missing that piece.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the ways that you could think about this is to actually start to put it in the language of risk management. And start to think about it not as a problem that you're going to solve with a point solution once and then it stays solved for forever, but it's a risk that you're going to have to manage over time. And that means you're going to bring different tools to the discussion. So when I often go out and talk to CEOs now, I often say that you need to think about where you're making your investments. And it may well be the case that your next marginal dollar is probably not better spent on another blinky box, but is better spent on, for example, developing a really good incident response plan. One that encompasses the full array of things that you're going to actually have to do when you deal with a major incident. Or do you actually know what information is on your network? Why do you have it? As a cybersecurity guy, I'll tell you the best kind of information on a network is the stuff that's not there. If you don't have it, I don't have to protect it. Have you actually thought through, why do I have this massive pile of PII on my network? Do I really need it for my mission? And if I don't, let's get rid of it. So you could manifestly improve, I know this is going to sound strange, but if you actually did a better data retention policy, you could actually improve your cybersecurity. Not very sexy, but those are the kinds of solutions we need to be working towards.